On today's show, I'm going to be talking about religious universalism. Can it work? And can you blend Buddhism with other religions to make them better? But let's first ask ourselves a very profound question. Do different religions have very different end goals? And are the core mechanics different? Can an also true pagan practice their paganism and blend it with Buddhism? But let us look at what the Buddha said about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The first noble truth, to live is to suffer. The second, suffering is caused by desire. Third, suffering can be overcome. And fourth, the way to overcome suffering is the Eightfold Path. To me, that seems like a contradiction. Suffering is caused by desire, but you have to want or desire to follow the Eightfold Path to achieve nirvana. That's a contradiction. All desire is wrong, but you have to desire to work towards nirvana. So to follow rule number 1, you have to break rule number 2. But let's look at the Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is the Eightfold Path. But now let's compare the 9 noble virtues of Asatru: courage, discipline, fidelity, honor, hospitality, industriousness, perseverance, self-reliance, and truth. The Asatru pagans, I think, have a more consistent religious view than do the Buddhists. To be an Asatru pagan, you desire to be with clan. You desire to be a part of the community. Desire is a good thing in Asatru. To feast, to be attached to one's group, to one's clan. They don't have this internal contradiction as do the Buddhists. But it should be noted, I'm not a pagan. Thought I do have a great respect to my pagan friends who tend to be a very noble and industrious bunch. I could not follow the religion of Asatru. I thought I'm not a pacifist. The idea of having to die in battle or dying on a Viking raid, I find very problematic. Also the concept of the Harlem gang, where one could challenge somebody to a duel. That was acceptable in ancient days. But now we have to ask the question, can you practice Buddhism and Christianity? Or can you be a Christian and use elements of Buddhism to enhance your Christianity to be a better Christian? I really don't think so. And there's many points to be made. For example, in some Buddhist traditions, the dead are judged by a demon called King Yama or King Yama in some Buddhist traditions. Now in Christianity, who judges the living and the dead? Also in Christianity, do you desire to be united to the church? Do you desire to partake in the communion of the saints? Do you desire to live forever? Do you desire to attain heaven? Where in Buddhism, the concept of nirvana is very different. Nirvana is not another word for heaven. The concept of nirvana is very different. Thought different Buddhists believe in different things about nirvana. Some Buddhists believe nirvana is the cessation of all pain and suffering. Other Buddhists believe nirvana is the concept of self and the ego is gone. Thought a spiritual essence still remains. But a very large percentage of Buddhists believe in complete annihilation of both of suffering and of the concept of self. Annihilation of self aspect of nirvana. But can you even blend nirvana with Hinduism? I mean, let's just look at the concept of moksha, which is the highest goal in Hinduism. Now, in Hinduism, they believe human beings have a soul, and human beings travel through lifetime after lifetime, dying and reincarnating. And over time, a human being can learn to shed karmic weight, and hopefully one day achieve moksha, where one becomes one with the universe, which is infinite. And moksha is a permanent state of joy and bliss. Now compare that to nirvana, where some Buddhists believe in annihilation of self. And Buddhists put a large emphasis on non-permanence. So one religion says there's permanence, another religion says there's no permanence. So how do you blend the Buddhist concept of anatta or non-self with Christianity or Hinduism? Or also true, how do you blend that concept with these other religions? Remember, the anatta. Buddhists believe that the concept of self is an illusion, and through practicing meditation, you can free yourselves from that illusion. There is no self in Buddhism, which doesn't make sense to me because they have leaders and lamas. So as soon as you give someone a title such as a leader, then is that not individuality? Remember, Buddhists do not believe in individuality or a concept of self. But yet they say some people have a monkey brain, or they say it's universal, and you need to overcome desire, but you have to practice Buddhism. So you have a desire to practice Buddhism, what you just broke one of the Four Noble Truths. And it's just a contradiction cycle, which really doesn't make any sense to me. I remember arguing with a Buddhist, if you could even call it that. This Buddhist would ask questions, and if you gave an answer that he did not like, well, he said that's monkey brain. Or if you asked too many questions that he could not answer, well, that's monkey brain. If you disagreed with him, that's monkey brain. But everybody has monkey brain. Okay. Then why don't you call it everything-ism? And if there's no permanent self in Buddhism, one day you would have monkey brain and another day you would just disappear. But if there's no self in Buddhism, then how can you have monkey brain? Or you need to practice meditation to overcome monkey brain and desire, but you have to desire to practice meditation. So we just broke one of the Four Noble Truths. So no, you cannot blend Buddhism with other religions. But can you blend some of the New Age religions, such as Wicca, with Christianity or Judaism? Now, to understand Wicca, one has to understand one of the founders of Wicca, Gerald Gardner. His story is quite interesting. But remember, in Wicca, magic, divination, casting spells plays a very large role in the Wicca faith. Now, compare that to the Jewish Torah that has very strong prohibitions against magic and divination. So how do you blend Wicca with Judaism or Wicca with Christianity that still has the strong prohibitions against practicing magic? how do you blend these religions together? People claim you can be Christian and Wicca, but then how do you get around these strict prohibitions against magic? Now, it is true, many people do blend different Eastern religions together. I don't deny a lot of people do that. But I want to put forth this argument. Let's look at their 5 elements. Let's talk about the core mechanics, or one of the core mechanics of these religions, or their view of reality itself. You know the 5 elements: earth, fire, water. The Hindus, as a part of their 5 elements, they have a sky and sound as one of their 5 elements. The Buddhists, on the other hand, have the void. Taoists or Taoists, on the other hand, in their 5 elements, they have a wood and metal, which is not found in Hinduism or Buddhism. So each of the 3 different religions I've just mentioned, each one has a different 5-element system. So how do we blend these systems together? Who was right? So I think my argument's pretty solid against blending different religions together. Remember, different religions have completely different end goals. But let's talk about why I personally rejected Buddhism. I found the story of the Buddha very problematic, and let's just try to take it literal. The Buddha was born into the warrior caste in India, and he lived the first 29 years of his life in a palace. His father decided to shelter him from all suffering, sorrow, and pain. So the Buddha lived in the palace for 29 years, indulging himself, wearing the finest clothing, watching dancing women, listening to live musicians, living a life filled with pleasure. Until one day, the Buddha decided to get on his chariot and go on multiple trips outside the palace, where for the first time in his life, he saw an old man, a sickly man, a dead man, and finally he saw a monastic. This really troubled the Buddha. He had never seen suffering in his life. So after these trips, he went back into the palace and walked into his private room where his wife and newborn son were sleeping. And he looked at his wife and newborn son and nicknamed his newborn son Ball and Chain, because they would hold them back. So he decided to leave them. So he got onto his horse, the horse leapt over the palace wall, and he began his spiritual journey. How does abandoning your wife and kid end suffering or stop suffering? So the Buddha tried many different spiritual exercises, and he thought they were wrong until he discovered the middle path and the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. But isn't that problematic? Did the Buddha receive any theological training from the religious background that he was from? If he never left the palace, how could he be taught by these Brahmins or the clergymen in Hinduism? How could he have learned much from theology? And how could he have somehow gotten it all right? And this older tradition that's thousands of years old is wrong? I know Hinduism has a very open policy, and it's very open to different interpretations. But the Buddha made some significant changes from the Hinduism he was born into. So here's a guy who has no real theological training, just meditating and he somehow gets this all figured out. This older tradition is wrong. And as I mentioned before, there's no self in Buddhism, the anatta, but you refer to the Buddha as the enlightened one. So people do not have a self, but refer to him as the enlightened one. You just gave him a title. And you refer to him as a teacher. Well, that is a title. I find that very problematic. As soon as you give something a name and recognize a difference, that is individualization. This person has achieved enlightenment, this person has not. There is a difference, but yet you say there is no individualization. And the claims of Buddhism, you have to practice their mindful meditation to discover their truth to be real. Honestly, anything spiritual that cannot be experienced in a normal mindset, I find very questionable. It's like some shamanistic religions use drugs to achieve a spiritual state. But if you have to rely on meditation to achieve or to observe a certain state, you're relying on an altered state, which is very questionable. And I do not put much weight in anything that I cannot experience in a normal day-to-day state. So these claims are very questionable. Also, the claim that Buddhism is the only scientific religion. Okay. I remember nuns arguing in their tradition that they cannot have roles in monasteries or leadership roles because they are women. But they argue reincarnation is true and provable because men have 3X chromosomes and women have 4X chromosomes. So therefore that proves men in a previous lifetime were reincarnated as women. I'm sorry. Okay, you have cartilage in your body. Are you a shark? You have skin. Well, doesn't every mammal have skin? Muscles, lungs, organs, a brain, heart, blood, oxygen, whatever else I failed to mention, nerve endings. So for these reasons and many more, I have rejected the idea of reincarnation. I have done another video that covers this topic more in depth. But is Buddhism the only scientific religion? That claim is so very problematic. If it was the only scientific religion, why is there different groups of Buddhism? You have Tibet Buddhism, you have Zen Buddhism, you have the Buddhism that's practiced in Thailand. I mean, how's it practiced in Vietnam? How's it practiced in China and the United States? Different nations practice their Buddhism differently. And these different sects have different interpretations and different teachings about Buddhism. Now, if it was scientific, I mean, what temperature does water boil at? What temperature does water freeze at? Scientists don't argue about this. It's like physics. We know how physics works. There are some things in science that we don't completely understand, but what we do understand, we don't have different groups of scientists saying different things, or at the very least, legitimate scientists. I mean, there's always quacks. But if Buddhism was scientific, you should be able to do this, and this, and get to the same result. If it was scientific, you would perform this test, and that test, and get to the same result. But so the very fact that there's these different groups of Buddhists teaching different things, how does that make it scientific? How does it fulfill the claim it's a scientific-based religion? But even the current craze over mindfulness and mindful meditation, how can it increase your happiness and work life? I even find that claim very problematic. I mean, yes, meditation can be very relaxing, but how does that really improve anything? I mean, if you're just relaxing, your problems keep piling up. I mean, why not just sleep or read a book or do some other form of entertainment? You're not working, you're not taking control or charge of your life. Your problems are just going to start to pile up and pile up and pile up. It's almost like you can almost compare it to someone who just tries to drink their problems away. Guess what? Their problems are still there till they deal with them. Just go online and look up some of the stories of some of the dangers that have occurred and that have happened with people who have practiced mindful meditation. I mean, some people can depersonalize and derealize. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You can actually find meditation sermons or meditation events that they actually work towards depersonalization and derealization, which is interesting because a lot of people think depersonalization and derealization are mental diseases or mental illness. People who suffer high stress or very traumatic experiences can depersonalize and derealize, but yet some people use meditation to achieve that state. But yet, a lot of people think depersonalization, derealizations classifies as a mental disease. Who is right? How do we blend these different ideas together? Or the tantric ritual found in Tibet Buddhism, the tantric ritual of chod. How many different religions can that be mixed with? Be honest. And really ask yourself the question, can you practice that tantric ritual of chod with other religions? And look at the other religions' end goals. Would that not be forbidden in different religions? Do your own research. Maybe just pick 4 different religions. And just maybe, read up on them, study them, and look at their core mechanics and their end goals. This video by no means goes into any religion in any real detail. Everything in this video is just a basic summary. There is so much more depth in the religious traditions. And it is indeed very fascinating to study. But once one attains a basic understanding of the different religious traditions, ask yourself, can religious universalism even work if the end goals are completely different? Let me make a secular argument. You have 3 men. One man wants to build a homeless shelter to help the needy. Another man is working towards buying a boat so he can sail off to Mexico to avoid paying taxes. The third man wants to simply experiment with drugs, get high, and have psychedelic experiences. From a secular viewpoint, each man is working towards different end goals. So why would they achieve the same end goal if they're so diligently working towards different goals and working towards different objectives? So why would their religious life be any different? Different religions have different end goals.